So this guy here, this guy that you're about to see is about to run for president.
The benevolent dictator of the world, I would legalize bestiality where you are giving, where you are pleasuring the animal. You see what I'm saying?
The same guy who also at the exact same time had a bit of a meltdown because he could not board a plane that had mechanical issues.
Hours, don't give me this. Where's the plane? Here, I got a question for you. When did you make the decision that we weren't gonna have a plane? When did you make that decision? Who made the decision? Who made the decision that we weren't? It's funny to you, right? It's not funny to us.
I got that there from Dame Pesos. Don't worry, we're going to be discussing Cenk Uygur in this video, but there's something very, very weird going on here. It seems to me like the 2024 presidential field is getting a little bit crowded, and I mean in just about every single direction. But make sure you guys stick around for the full video because we are, in fact, going to be discussing this particular guy. Now, before we get started on this, let me just go ahead and say right now that there is a lot that we could say about Cenk. All the meltdowns, the incident that occurred at the airport, which I showed some of that to you guys. I showed a little small bit of that to you guys at the very beginning of the video. Of course, that there came from Dame Pesos' channel. He is back on YouTube, so I'll be more than likely leaving a link to his channel if you guys want to go check it out. But of all the bad positions that anybody at TYT has ever had, Cenk is obviously the zealot over there. He's the actual true person who really and truly believes in what the hell he says. Even though, obviously, you've got Anna Kasparian, whom, by the way, I've actually praised in previous videos because she's came out against the woke mob. However, it does not mean she's fully changed. John Adirola, he is absolutely terrible, and every other personality they throw out there just seems to be really, really bad. I would direct you to someone like, say, Sean Fitzgerald or other channels that actually make fun of TYT on a regular basis or call those guys out before you actually listen to me on this topic. I know you're probably thinking, well, why in the world are you doing a video on Cenk Uygur? I'm doing this video more along the lines to kind of dispel some misbeliefs and kind of explain to people that really, for the most part, this right here could end up looking like an absolute disaster and being a bit of a joke. And it would actually be quite ironic, especially given the fact that the follow-up video on this this topic is to talk about RFK Jr., a person who was polling at 20% in the Democratic primary, a person who is actually anti-Second Amendment, and is also a climate attorney. I think I said in one video he was a doctor. I apologize if I said that. I got that wrong. Obviously, my bad on that. I'm owning it now. However, in the case of RFK Jr., he actually appeals more to Democrats and what we would say city voters that were not going to vote Republican anyways. We'll talk more about that in the follow-up video. But there's one thing that Cenk Uygur has done that has actually proven himself to be a great big giant snake oil salesman, besides the fact that he already ran for Congress once in his district and he got absolutely nothing. That was back in 2020. I think it was primarying the congresswoman there. Maybe it was 2018. I'm not sure, but he was primarying the congresswoman there who had gotten in trouble over what was pretty much a sex scandal, of course, involving another female employee in her office at the time, which, of course, she was a congresswoman. I guess it was somebody that was just working there. She'd been messing around with for a while. I'll leave an article in the description box about Cenk's failed run. Okay, so just go ahead and throw that out there. Now, the main reason why it is that he has decided he wants to suddenly get into the race, and going back to the egregious thing that he did, it was this book he's been promoting called Justice is Coming. We'll get to that here in a second. But let me give you guys a bit of an update on what Cenk is actually doing and why it is that while he was all in for Biden after Bernie Sanders dropped out, of course, because they were all mostly just extreme never-Trumpers, extreme anybody who was right of center or anybody who was right of left center. Let's go ahead and roll this to give you guys some additional context on why it is that many people actually think he's being serious about this, when of course some of us know that it's not really serious at all.
Tired of these guys. We're doing a petition. And so, look, the petition is get out. I put it a lot more politely than that because a lot of people love Joe Biden for whatever reason. They just think he's too old and he's going to lose. I 100% agree that he's going to lose. So we're doing a petition. President Biden, please drop out. And I put it very nicely. President Joe Biden has had a long and historied career in American government. He rescued us from the possibility of a second Trump term. And we
As you guys can see right there, he's not exactly good with Joe Biden being the Democratic Party nominee. Now, many people have speculated that what the Democrats plan on doing is they plan on swapping him out for Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama, or possibly the current Vice President, Kamala Harris. I have theorized that it more than likely would be Kamala Harris if Joe Biden is not the nominee. Now, I want to go ahead and get this part out of the way now about who could win, who could not win. I was listening to somebody the other day talk about this, and they were saying that more than likely Biden would still get elected because of the fact of, and this is the guy who claimed to be someone, I'm not going to say who it was, but he basically talked about the fact that polls tend to tighten. Right now, former President Trump is actually beating Joe Biden in a lot of polls, and he's actually much, much stronger than he was in 2020, his reelection effort. Now, me being the Trump guy, you probably think that I would sit here and say that Donald Trump will win the election. Well, I'll tell you what will more than likely occur regardless on election night. I want to go ahead and get this part of the way now. More than likely, Republicans, with the actual advantage, the economy and everything going the way it's going, they would get a surge in votes. Now, will it be enough to put Donald Trump over? I'm not entirely sure about that. I mean, they are trying to indict the hell out of the guy, and they're trying to make crap. As a matter of fact, they're doing it again today. Apparently, it's in the civil case in New York, and it doesn't look very good as far as the jury pool. And, of course, we all know he's probably going to get convicted on that. And, of course, there's been a lot of polls out there that say that people would not vote for him if he was actually convicted. I personally don't buy those polls because then they release polls like this here that I'm showing you, of course, the list of polls that were in the RCP aggregate where Trump is actually up that seem to indicate the exact opposite. I'm going to hold my position on that for the near future, but let's just say this right here. When a guy has got over 50 points in the primary, it's pretty much a lock. He's got over 50 points over his next opponent, what I meant to say. He's pretty much got that one sewn up. What will more than likely happen on election night, even if Trump was to lose, however, is that Republicans would more than likely flip the Senate, win some state and local races, probably some additional governorships, and of course they would add to Congress, which would obviously hold the current regime in place and keep it from dragging the country down further. However, I am still inclined to believe that if anything goes completely south and sour, Trump would still actually win the race. That right there meaning if things continue on the path that we're going with interest rates constantly being raised, the war in Ukraine practically lost, we're still giving money out to that nation, chances are he would probably win. Typically, incumbents still get reelected, but there are the very, very rare cases, like, say, for example, in 1980, where the incumbent got beat, or in 1968, where the incumbent party got beat, Hubert Humphrey. And this entire election cycle looks very similar to 1968. I've brought this up a couple of times. So why in the world is Cenk deciding to come on out here and run? Is it possible that he may be inadvertently turning progressive voters against Joe Biden? We'll answer that here in a second, but I want to go ahead and say this right now about this whole book he's been promoting called Justice is Coming. That book was on TYT's website for about 3 or 4 years. He was basically scamming people into giving him money for that book, and yet it was not actually released. I wonder what the release on it is now, like exactly how many people have actually bought that book, because he practically scammed people for about 3 or 4 years on that particular book. And of course, it took 3 or 4 years for it to actually be released. You guys kind of see where I'm going at with this, where Cenk's got a bit of a history of being a bit of a scam artist, and TYT is constantly asking their viewers for money. But still, though, with that right there being said, let's go ahead and get to this first clip, because he was actually asked by the Hill, which is a little bit more left-leaning. Don't be fooled when they tell you, people like Breaking Points or whatnot tell you, because Sagar and Getty is on the right, definitely one of the weakest conservatives I've ever seen in my life. And, of course, we all know how bad Crystal Ball is. They typically tell us that they're all anti-establishment, but yet they only have left-wing personalities on their show. Well, Cenk was actually asked about this early on, especially as far as why it is that he's actually running in his book. I want to go ahead and take care of this first, so make sure you guys watch this all the way through. We'll come back on the other end.
Uger is out with a new book entitled Justice is Coming, How Progressives Are Going to Take Over the Country, and America is going to love it. I don't know if I'm going to love it, but apparently America will.
The book argues two main ideas. One, that progressives are correct on substantively these kind of policy issues. And two, America is actually a very progressive country. Millions of us know that we are part of something larger and that a movement is already transforming Washington. Cenk is here with us now to discuss. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here.
So this was part of the Bernie 2020 pitch, obviously, that there's a genuine populist movement that just needs to be tapped into in the United States. And there were many aspects of that campaign that seemed to validate that reality, the fact that he out-fundraised everybody else in the race, despite not taking any corporate PAC money or billionaire dollars. But at the end of the day, seemed unable to squeak one out, both in 2016 and 2020. So what do you say to folks who push back against the idea that progressivism is actually popular, given that we have not had very much success in the electoral realm?
Yeah. So a decent amount of the book is actually dedicated to that. First, chapter 1 explains that it's indisputable that the country is progressive on almost every issue. I say almost just because maybe I couldn't find one.
Now, guys, here's the thing that I really and truly want to take away from this. Cenk was talking about progressive positions being super popular. Okay, well, let's kind of break this down. One of the main things that people love to talk about is free healthcare, and free healthcare is popular. Okay, well, if you ask anybody on the street, if you ask anybody anywhere, you ask them, would you like to be able to go into a doctor and get something checked out and not get charged for it? They'll tell you flat out, yeah, we would kind of like that to happen. Of course, I've done videos on free healthcare before and why it's an absolute disaster. And of course, those who mostly want free healthcare are typically the ones who kind of put their body in a position where they would actually need healthcare, a la people who are obese, people like myself who smoke or whatnot. And I'm not advocating for free healthcare at all. I never have. I think it would be an absolute disaster. If you want free healthcare in the United States, it would be the equivalent of what the VA does. And trust me, you don't want that. But the problem is this way, when you poll somebody on that topic, the first thing you're going to get is you're going to get a very, very high amount of people saying, yeah, we're in favor of free healthcare. But then you ask the person how much they'd be willing to pay to get it, because nothing in this country is ever free. Nothing in the world is free at all. Taxpayer dollars are going to go for it. What's the actual price tag on it? And the poll, for the most part, the support cuts almost in half, meaning that once you actually present people with the reality, they suddenly don't want it anymore. Abortion is another topic. Like me, for example, I'm a pro-lifer, so you're probably thinking I'm against abortion altogether. And I've told you guys before, the only time I'm actually okay, well, not even okay, really more understandable about it, is in the event of the life of the mother. Okay, now in the case of abortion, when you poll people, it typically tends to be anywhere between 43 to 49% opposed, meaning 43 to 49% are actual, pro-lifers. Then you get a certain subsection that is okay with abortion up to a certain point. Normally it ends at roughly right around 24 weeks. When you get to about 24 to 30 weeks, most people tend to say, no, that's just a little bit too far. These right here, by the way, are progressive positions that Cenk Uygur actually touts. I'll give you another one, taxation. They say they want to tax the rich. Well, it always sounds great to say we're going to tax the rich. However, when you then tax the hell out of somebody and then you see inflation like what you're seeing now, people will begin to say maybe it wasn't a good idea taxing the rich, because you obviously have to have somebody with money to pay your salary. So most of the positions that Cenk Uygur proposes and says are actually popular, the vast majority of these are not realistic in nature. It's kind of one of the reasons why it is that we feel that most progressive ideas are in fact very bad ideas. And these things are just not based on any form of reality. And when you actually give somebody the reality, they tend to change their minds pretty quick. Now, granted, I will leave that entire segment. It's about 30 minutes long in the description box. But the one that really gets me is the initial announcement. The announcement of which, by the way, he did with Crystal Ball and Saagar Engeti. Now, I mentioned Saagar Engeti earlier. I would not call Saagar Engeti a conservative. He typically tends to be one of the weaker ones out there. If you guys remember Sean Hannity and Alan Colmes when they had their show on Fox, Hannity and Colmes, Colmes was kind of the guy who played second fiddle to Sean. It was the same exact thing with Breaking Points, and it used to be The Rising, where basically Saagar Engeti would try to play second fiddle to Crystal Ball, who, by the way, is, I'm not going to go too far on this one, because if I do, I'm just going to start saying some things that, quite frankly, are a little bit too mean in nature, and I try to be as absolutely honest with my audience as humanly possible. But let's go ahead and roll this first part, and let's talk about why it is that, once again, it's more stuff that, quite frankly, is not rooted in reality.
Notwithstanding, both Democrats and Republicans don't really know how to hit Donald Trump. Chris Christie's the closest. At least he's aggressive and not shy about it, not scared.
Yeah.
He's the only person in neither party not scared of Trump. Having said that, I have 1,000 better ways to hit Donald Trump, and they just won't do it. You should put a nickname on him, Spoiled Donnie. He got $400 million from his dad. He blew it all because he's a spoiled little child. And then when the country took his toy away, which was the American government, he wanted to break the toy, right? That's who he is, spoiled little baby. You have to undercut his strength. And the Democrats keep calling him racist, sexist, bigot, etc. Dude, everybody already knows that, okay? And for a lot of those voters, unfortunately, that's not the bug, that's the feature. But even so, it's not all folks who are, exactly. There's a lot of anti-establishment people there, especially among independents. You need to deliver on issues,
and you need to attack him where it hurts. He's a terrible businessman. He's weak, insecure, a baby. Undercut his strength instead of constantly feeding into he's too strong. Oh, that's a terrible way of attacking him.
Okay, let me go ahead and start by saying this right here. I'm a Trump guy, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, there are things that Donald Trump does that, quite frankly, does in fact get on my nerves. For example, when he was president in 2019, he was tinkering with the idea of red flag laws. He almost lost me altogether. I've talked about this on multiple occasions. The wall thing. Well, I kind of chalk that up more along the lines of it being mostly bravado. And of course, I also chalk a lot of that up to having a party that went out of their way to work against him. Of course, you know, I hear a lot of people say, well, here he is praising Paul Ryan. Okay, it was 2018 going into a re-election effort for the Senate, the Congress's midterm re-election. You need to kind of keep everybody intact. The party, a lot of things that you hear a lot of the online right that they actually throw at Donald Trump, a lot of the criticisms, they can easily be countered with good old-fashioned common sense, even though I just told you that he was angling for red flag laws, which, by the way, we found out later on what was really going on was Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump were in the White House advising him on this after the whole, I think it was the Stoneman Douglas shooting. I think it was 2018. Trump actually almost lost me then. And, of course, you had the bump stock ban, which I already knew after he signed that it would eventually get struck down by a lower court. Anytime you sign executive orders, normally they do, in fact, get struck down. But back to Cenk Uynger's criticisms. When he talks about the best thing you can do is attack him because he's a whiny little baby, and I will say there are some things that, quite frankly, he's whined about. One thing in particular we'll be talking about in the second video. I'm pretty sure you guys already know what it is because people were getting banned for talking about a certain election at one time, and now YouTube is kind of like allowed to talk about it again. But still at the same time, some of us have, let's just say, some of us still don't want to go through the process of having to run the risk of getting community guideline strikes retrograded back to previous videos. So if I release a video on 2020, give you my honest to God thoughts, full thoughts, yeah, the chances are they're probably going to come in here and suspend you about maybe 2 or 3 years later after the election's over with. But here's the thing. The best way to really attack Donald Trump, if you're really and truly going to attack him, the best thing you can do is just ignore him. That's really and truly the best way to do it. Look, I just showed you guys a poll earlier where Trump is at like 52%, like 52 points on DeSantis, and you see that Trump's not doing any debates. Well, why the hell would you do debates if you're 50 points up nationwide? Why would you do that? It doesn't make any daggone sense. Also, something else, too, when you're currently under indictment, you're going through a civil case or a civil charge or whatever, it's probably best that you keep your mouth closed and don't divulge any details on the debate stage, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of these people are actually going to hit you in that area and try to get you to answer. So really, in a lot of ways, there's probably a very good reason why it is that Trump's actually not on the debate stage, and I really and truly don't blame him. But I do think that the real reason why he's not there has got more to do with the second thing that I said, that he could say something on the stage, and next thing you know, the mainstream media is going to run with it. Next thing you know, to go on top of this. I don't trust the current GOP to not hurt the eventual nominee. As far as him being a bad businessman, let's take a look at this. So the guy borrows $1 million from his daddy. He invests it, creates the he doesn't create the Commodore Hotel, but he renovated the Commodore Hotel in New York. It eventually started to make money. He eventually starts building his own brand. He puts a lot of money into the Trump Business Organization. The man has been around ever since the late 1970s in some form or another, and he's always been in the public eye. He was a businessman. He's been a businessman his entire career, mostly in the real estate field. He's got a lot of businesses that were successful, but he's also got this situation where a judge has just ordered him to dissolve his company and said he kind of defrauded people. But yet when you actually look at the properties that they claim he defrauded on, the vast majority of adjusters did not buy that right away. That was just another BS line from a bunch of crazy judges. Fact of the matter is, the man is richer than I'll ever be. He's richer than probably most of my audience will ever be. I don't say that to be a jerk or anything. I'm saying he's richer than most people out there in the world, and probably richer than what Cenk Uynger is ever going to be. By the way, Cenk, before you start talking about corruption, I need you to look in the mirror, because last week you got $25 million from Jeffrey Romer and Buddy Katzenberg. So I think you might want to be quiet when it comes to this topic. And do I also need to remind you of this right here one more time?
The benevolent dictator of the world, I would legalize bestiality where you are giving, where you are pleasuring the animal. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, do you think it's okay for people to have sex with animals? Okay, so I think you might want to chill on that one there. But the thing that you have to understand is that someone in the case like Donald Trump, the best thing you can do is just not give him any attention. If you really and truly want to beat Donald Trump, don't give him any attention. Okay, the more and more attention you give, the more and more he realizes that no press is bad press. Now, sometimes you can get in trouble with this, but let's be honest. No press is bad press. He's just going to take it. He's going to spin it. He's going to use it. Typically, when people are under indictment or under some form of political persecution, they typically tend to win. Nelson Mandela, of course, you got the guy down in Brazil. It always tends to work because it feeds an underdog narrative. It feeds a narrative of he's being persecuted by the state, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about after this clip here.
Shift even more marginal among Black voters and Black men in particular. So isn't it a little bit too triumphant to assume that these demographic groups that support progressive values and tend to support Democrats right now are just going to continue to vote in the same way that they have historically?
Yeah, so those are great questions. So there's a couple of very important differences. So first of all, Democrats took those minority demographics for granted. They're like, oh, Black people and Latinos are always going to vote for us.
Right.
We don't actually have to deliver for them. So, for example, this time around, bare minimum was voting rights, and then they didn't do voting rights.
Right.
Right? They didn't even really try to do voting rights. They almost never deliver on those things. Joe Biden's delivered on about 20 to 25% of his agenda, but not nearly good enough. You have to, and you see the discontent in African-American media, like Charlemagne and others, et cetera. Latinos now trumps up to 42%. So just saying, hey, you're Black or you're brown, vote for me is not good enough, right? But for young people, they're not going to all of a sudden turn around and hate gay people, hate Black people. Their identity is usually set, as I explained in the book, meta studies show between the ages of 14 and 24. And once it is set, it does not change. So they're not going to randomly turn into hateful folks or corporate politics.
Demographic shifts. Well, let's talk about this because as you guys may have already seen in previous videos, Trump's getting a bigger slice of the Black vote, mostly the Black male vote, and in a much, much lower turnout election. This is obviously going to favor him. What's really ironic is that the people that Cenk are going after are the same exact people that would be inclined to vote for someone like, say, RFK, or possibly be inclined to vote for Cornel West, who we're going to be mentioning in the next video as well, because we got to talk about RFK and the third party run, because many people believe that Trump's going to get Ross Perot. When in reality, what's more than likely going to occur is that Joe Biden's the one who's going to get Ross Perot. And not to mention the fact that it is a redo of 1968. So we'll be talking more about that in the next video. Cenk's whole premise here is completely unrealistic. If he launches a presidential bid, he may get 1% in a state like, say, California, or 1% of the overall vote, which is mostly just going to be progressives that would just end up giving Trump the election victory anyways. That would be very ironic that the person who claims to hate Donald Trump the most would actually run and would actually give him the election win. I do think that would actually be hilarious. So, no, this guy here is never going to be president, let alone the nominee. Now, guys, I showed you some more of that because most people who know who Cenk Uygur is, they already know that he's a joke. They already know that he's absolutely, he's clown shoes, okay? Nobody's ever going to take him serious. But there is one more thing that I want to say that I touched on very briefly, but I did not come back to, and I want to go ahead and talk about this now. Talk about elections as a whole. I mentioned earlier that I don't know who's going to win the presidential election, but I did mention that if Trump is on the ballot and he's running for president, and by the way, the 14th Amendment bid to get him off the ballot was just rejected, so more than likely he's probably still going to be there anyways. Regardless of what happens on election night, more than likely Republicans would still add to their congressional seats and would more than likely still add to state and local legislative bodies, and at the same exact time they would more than likely still add to the United States Senate. They more than likely would flip it. The Democratic Party is really scared of Donald Trump at this moment in time because of what he could do when it comes to the Senate. The 2024 Democratic Party Senate map has got about 12 separate candidates that they've got to find a way to defend. Well, you always spend a lot more money when you're in the defense. Now, normally, if there's not many Senate seats on the line, you don't tend to spend that much money when it comes to actually defending your party. But when you've got this many Senate seats, and I'm talking about Arizona, Nevada, Montana, West Virginia, Ohio, Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin's up. I want to say you've got about 5 or 6 more, including Pennsylvania, which is going to be close, and Michigan too, where Republicans actually got a couple of candidates. One of them is James Craig, who can more than likely win that seat. You've got a lot. You've got a lot to try to spend your money on to defend. And unlike people that you see online, like, say, I don't know, Jenna Ellis, the people who were in the DeSantis campaign, who, by the way, Even if their boy was to even get the nomination, you would need the full base to get on top. My assessment is that as long as the base actually shows up and votes for the nominee, given the circumstances we're in right now, would more than likely still win the election regardless. That right there being the non-incumbent would more than likely still win. I understand that there are people out there who are on the right, who are moderate right, who actually think that Trump has absolutely no chance to win the election. But a lot of these people that I've heard talk about this don't even bring up the fact that Trump is actually doing a lot better in the overall polling aggregate and all that stuff. And I know polls don't mean a whole lot, but still at the same time, when the current nominee, the current sitting president of the United States, is suddenly down by 3 points in the overall RCP aggregate, that is a problem. So, yes, they probably want to replace him with Gavin Newsom. Wait a minute. I told you guys earlier that Gavin Newsom was not going to be the guy they were going to replace him with. That's correct. They're not going to, and the reason why is because Gavin Newsom, quite frankly, is not electable. Of course, we'll talk more about this in the next video, but I want to go ahead and touch on a certain bit of it now. Gavin Newsom is the governor of California. We hear about California being an absolute crap hole every day. The crime is out of control. The most that Gavin Newsom is going to get in a general election is the most blue of blue states. You've also got this union issue in Michigan right now, and even though Biden will ensure these people are paid off, it's still not going to work when you're trying to go fully green as far as your overall energy. You see, as far as the green energy is concerned, you see, while you may pay these people off after saying you're going to get rid of their job, there's going to be a whole group of people over here who are going to say you did not take care of this problem that are suddenly not going to show up and vote, or they may vote third party for someone like, say, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Cornel West. Trust me, Cenk Unger's not going to get any votes. You see, where you may gain somebody back at, you're also losing somebody, and that's starting to show in the polls. Fact of the matter is this right here. If you don't think that former President Trump can win, I hate to tell you this, he can win, and he can actually win in an absolute landslide now that the game has obviously changed. But still at the same time, what does that do with Cenk? Well, like I said before, it would be absolutely hilarious if Cenk Unger did in fact get on the ballot and got 1 to 2% of progressives who more than likely would have voted for Biden, but because Cenk matches their ideological beliefs, they say, you know what, Trump's probably going to win, or you know what, Biden's probably going to win anyways, and they end up going out there and voting for Cenk Unger, and while he's sitting on TYT doing election coverage in 2024, he has an absolute meltdown because Donald Trump's already got 316 electoral college votes before midnight. So just know right now that Cenk's run is an absolute joke. With that right there being said, guys, make sure you guys hit that like button. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. I would love to get you guys' thoughts. Other things, too, to consider. Other things, too, that I'd like you guys. I'm over here talking about the next video already. Make sure you guys share the video, sound off in the comment section, share it to Facebook, YouTube. There should be 1 to 2 more videos out tomorrow to go along with this one right here. We're going to talk about RFK, and we're going to talk about this thing on Sunday Night Football where apparently everybody's upset with Rodney Harrison and they want NBC to fire him. So make sure you guys stick around for those 2 videos, and I'll see you guys later.